Hey guys, Mike here. So today, I'm here to talk to you about 1990s Back to the Future Part 3, starring Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly and Christopher Lloyd as Doc Brown. In Back to the Future Part 3, stranded in 1955, Marty McFly learns about the Doc's death in 1885 and must travel back in time to save him. And so we have Back to the Future Part 3. So guys, today's movie was requested again by my friend Ryan, who told me to watch the Back to the Future movies. I've watched the other two movies, and now I've watched the final movie. If you watch my reviews on those other two movies, you know that I had mixed feelings about them. Basically, I see why they're so great, I just didn't think they were all that. But despite my mixed feelings, I still wanted to see all the movies, and now I've watched the very last one in the series. So, what did I think of Back to the Future Part 3? Well, towards the start of the film, I was kind of wondering how and why they even would go back to the past. Because at the start of the movie, Doc's letter to Marty, which he received in the last movie, said basically, you know, don't come and get him, he's very happy there. And I was wondering, is he just not going to listen to him? Is he just going to ignore him? Is he going to be like, I just need to save the Doc? It's not until later on when he discovers that the Doc died a week after writing the letter. So feeling compelled to save his friend, Marty travels back in time to try and save the Doc. Which, to be honest, is definitely more than a decent motivation to go back in time again. I was just thinking with the setup that it was just going to feel like a forced journey, but in actual fact it just felt like something he had to do. And I would say that Back to the Future 3 does have a massive tonal shift from the second movie, because while all three movies are very lighthearted and fun, the second one did get very serious, with basically the threat of just reality imploding upon itself. But in the third movie, though there are stakes, it does feel very localized, it feels very small, it feels very personal, which I feel brings it back to the roots of the first movie, because honestly you can't really go bigger than universal destruction. So rather than trying to top themselves, they decided to tell a bit more of a small personal story, whilst at the same time keeping all the time travel stuff from the other films. But I would say this is the first one out of the three movies where I was more interested in them getting sidetracked by doing other things, as opposed to them working on their main task. Even though them trying to figure out how to get the time machine to work was still interesting, I just thought it was really good them, you know, just relaxing, having fun, just getting to know people. Because to be honest, we've had two other movies where they focus really heavy on just fixing things. It was just nice to have a bit more of a small story. And it was actually a great chance to see the Doc just more than just the mad scientist. Because even though he is good in the other two movies, you don't really get to see an exploration of his character. In the other two films, he's basically just the scientist, and that's really it. You get to hear about his ambitions as to why he wants to, you know, go through time and explore science. But you never really get to know too much about him as a person. You don't really find out what would make him happy. Whereas in this film, you definitely get to see that. Even though he is apprehensive at first, it was good to see him just let his guard down, like be a regular person, whilst at the same time maintaining what made his character great. And as well, I would say this was a really good conclusion to Marty's character as well, because like the Doc, Marty is a good character, but you don't really get to see much growth of his character. For the most part, he tends to just stay the same throughout the movies. Though he's not like a complete blank slate where there's just nothing going on there, it's just you don't really feel him change as a person. Whereas in this film, you get to see him overcome his greatest obstacle, which is his own pride, which is explored in the other movies, but it's never really put to the forefront. In the other films, it's just kind of played off as a joke. Someone calls him a chicken, he gets mad and says, I'm not a chicken. I mean, in the second film, you do still see that him being called a chicken does get him in trouble, but it's never really explored past the one point where in the future his future self gets fired because someone called him a chicken, and so naturally he did something stupid to prove that he wasn't a chicken. Whereas in the third movie, he really kind of gets down to the actual problem. It's the fact that he's got so much pride inside him. He wants to prove to everyone that he's not a coward, that he just ends up doing stupid things. And upon realizing this, with the help of some other people, he's able to overcome this flaw, which showed some actual growth for his character, which for me was definitely very welcomed. In the end, it just made his whole journey seem worth it, because it was all well and good his family being better off in the future that Marty created for them, but it just didn't really feel like, you know, that earned. It just kind of felt like something, well, everything works out in the end, great. But with this revelation, it actually felt like his journey mattered. Like stepping up to his greatest character flaw actually changed him. It's actually not something that I thought about when watching the movies, but actually thinking about it now, it was a really good moment. But as well, Back to the Future 3 doesn't feel like a complete retreading of the other movies. It does have moments that are basically shot for shot from the other two movies, but for the most part, it does feel like an entity of its own. And I would say that I did like the conclusion for the whole series, but to be honest, I kind of wanted a little bit more, because even though I was kind of a bit mixed on these movies as a whole, I just kind of wanted to see a little bit more of a conclusion. Even though the conclusion we got was perfectly fine, I just wanted to see a bit more of them adjusting to their new life, rather than it just kind of being like, that's going to be our life, or hey, here's my family, and that's kind of it. Overall, guys, I did like Back to the Future Part 3 as much as I did the other two movies. Pretty much the series as a whole, I wouldn't say that I liked any one movie more than the other one. If I was giving slight edges, I would probably say the first movie does kind of take the cake, because it does feel a lot more of a classic than the other two, because it's a very self-contained story, which, honestly, they could have just left it as is. They didn't necessarily need to have these sequels. I'm not saying that they're unwelcome, it's just, they could have just had the first movie, and that's it. It would have been perfectly fine just to have the one. But really though, I'd say there was parts of the first one I liked, parts of the second one I liked, and parts of the third one that I liked, and also things that I didn't like from all three of them as well, thus making them all equally as good to me. But do I think you guys should watch this one? Again, I would say the only reason to watch this movie is to see what all the fuss is about, see why everyone says it's a classic like the other two movies. Though I didn't actively dislike any of these movies, I wouldn't say that you absolutely need to rush to see them, going on my own personal opinion. Because honestly, even though I did like all of these movies, I didn't really feel like I was missing out on anything. I could have easily gone the rest of my life having never watched any of these movies, and I don't feel like I would have been any worse off for not watching them. But having watched them now, I would say, you know what, give them a watch, see what all the fuss is about. It's one of those movies that has really stood the test of time, and it's just something that everyone can enjoy. It's got a little bit of something that everyone can enjoy. So basically, in a nutshell, for the Back to the Future series, absolute classic movies. I wouldn't personally, though, hold them on a higher pedestal as most other people would. Still, though, good movies nonetheless. Okay guys, that's my review of Back to the Future Part 3. Do you love it? Do you hate it? What do you think I should watch next? Whatever it is, drop it in the comments below. Until next time, I've been Michael. See ya!